Well, we were in the middle of page 32, book 1, canto 3. And we were discussing the experiences of Ashwapati when he leaves the realm of the physical and the life plane and enters the realms of the mind. Of course, here the experiences are vaster, more universal, and of course more subtle. So we had read these lines: there knowledge needs not words to embody idea. Idea seeking a house in boundlessness, weary of its homeless immortality, asks not in thought's carved brilliant cell to rest, whose single window's clipped outlook on things sees only a little arc of God's vast sky. The boundless with the boundless there consorts, while there one can be wider than the world, while there one is one's own infinity. Now we'll take up today from this next line. His center was no more in earthly mind, a power of seeing silence filled his limbs, caught by a voiceless white epiphany into a vision that surpasses forms, into a living that surpasses life. He neared the still consciousness sustaining all. So here we have another experience where we see his center was no more in earthly mind, and once you go beyond this mental consciousness, what could be the different levels of experiences that come into your being? So we have here a whole list of them. But before taking up this list, I'd like to read out from this volume 5, Aurobindo's SABCL volume 5, on page number 133, a poem called Liberation. And you see the similarity of the experience that Aurobindo discusses here in the sonnet as well as in Savitri. I have thrown from me the whirling dance of mind and stand now in the spirit's silence free, timeless and deathless, beyond creature kind, the center of my own eternity. I have escaped, and the small self is dead. I am immortal, alone, ineffable. I have gone out from the universe I made and have grown nameless and immeasurable. My mind is hushed in a wide and endless light. My heart a solitude of delight and peace. My sense unsnared by touch and sound and sight. My body a point in white infinities. I am the one being, sole, immobile bliss. No one I am. I who am all that is. Well, of course, he has taken in this sonnet greater heights of the experience of liberation. But I wanted to just bring to your notice the first stanza, when he says, I have thrown from me the whirling dance of mind and stand now in the Spirit's silence free, timeless and deathless beyond creature kind, the center of my own eternity. You see how these lines resonate in Sri Aurobindo's own experience here in Savitri. His center was no more in earthly mind. Now once he is beyond this earthly mind, he is liberated, as you see in the sonnet, then there is a sense of the timeless and deathlessness. And we see similar things here in Savitri. A power of seeing silence filled his epiphany. And now, of course, seeing silence, I think we have discussed this some time before. I mean, you see, it's very, very interesting to see in all these lines that we are going to read now. Sri Aurobindo has a particular way of describing each noun. You see, silence is there, but he says it's a seeing silence. And it's very important to understand or to focus on this seeing silence, etc. And we'll see later on, mute, omnipotent peace. Why is he doing that? Because normally, in the old yogas, when we speak about silence, we think it to be something static, something passive, where your consciousness is kind of, resting. There's no dynamism. So Sri Aurobindo adds seeing silence. So which means it is dynamic, it is participating, it is part of the manifestation. It is not withdrawn from the manifestation. So these are the connotations we should catch there, otherwise we would miss the meaning. So silence is not a silence of withdrawal from manifestation. It is participating. So we can call it a dynamic silence, something that is very active. So a power of seeing silence filled his limbs. So now, although he has gone beyond the mind and there is a timelessness and deathlessness beyond creature kind, he is not one who has gone beyond manifestation. So he says, I am still in part of that, part of the manifestation. And caught by a voiceless white epiphany. Epiphany, as all of you know, is a descent or manifestation of a high consciousness. So he's now experiencing how he's seeing his limbs are filled with a silence that is dynamic. There's a great descent of a higher consciousness and into a vision that surpasses forms, into a living that surpasses life. Again, this is a beauty in Sri Aurobindo's line here. Vision that surpasses form. Again, there's a contrast there. Because the moment we say vision, I see things, I see forms, I see objects, I see a world. But no, he's making it clear, it's a vision of a world where there are no forms. So you see, these are small things, but that is what characterizes Sri Aurobindo and his experience. And he neared the still consciousness sustaining all. The still consciousness, you can all guess now, what is that consciousness that sustains this world? That consciousness of Satchidananda or of the Absolute, the Brahman, the reality, doesn't matter. But he is now saying, once you go through beyond the mind, you approach. You may not realize it directly, but there is a different approach. You are going closer to this consciousness that sustains all. Now this is again another experience. The voice that only by speech can move the mind became a silent knowledge in the soul. So normally when we communicate, knowledge is through voice, through talking, through this way of communication. But there, he says, became a silent knowledge in the soul. So there is no voice that really requires words and sentences and communication. It's a kind of a communication in silence. It's a direct knowledge by identity, where language has no place at all. The strength that only in action feels its truth was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. Beautiful. He said, the strength that only in action feels its truth. Normally, we say we are strong, we are doing good work and all that. Through what? Through the result of our actions. When we see, oh my God, this person has done this much of action, this is the result, then we say that he has done good work, it is a strong work, or whatever the strength it means. But here, that was lodged now in a mute, omnipotent peace. And that strength, we don't need an external outer action. But for him, for Ashwapati, he is there in that consciousness, which is now mute, omnipotent peace. Look at the beautiful phrase. Again the same idea, like we had previously, seeing silence. A peace that is omnipotent. Again the same idea is not a peace of passivity. It's a peace where there's dynamism, where there's energy, where there's force. Because each time he's kind of, not consciously though, but I can say he is adding this adjective to make it typically a la Aurobindonian. That means where in Sri Aurobindo we have both the Purusha and Prakriti in everything. They're together. Whereas in the old yogas there was a separation. So here he says, that was the mute, omnipotent peace. A leisure in the labor of the worlds. Now from here till the next, I don't know what's your page, but there's a line which says, the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods ceased in a truth which lives in its own light. Try to get that line. It is about 8, 9, 10 lines later. There's a verb here, the weeping of love ceased. So till that line, this is a kind of a one description. So if we do not catch this word ceased, we may not get the meaning. So what is happening here is that Sri Aurobindo is describing different experiences. And then he's saying all these experiences ceased. So verb that really connects all this comes after 10 lines. So if you miss the connection, we may miss the meaning. So I'm telling you in advance that what is happening here, a leisure in the labor of the worlds, a pause in the joy and anguish of the search, restored the stress of nature to God's calm. You see, this is the normal way of human evolution. There is an anguish of the search. There is all this nature stress. But all these things, what is happening with Ashwapati, they will cease later. A vast unanimity ended life's debate. The war of thoughts that fathers the universe, the clash of forces struggling to prevail in the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust, The grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, ploughed by the seeking of the world's desire, the long regurgitations in time's flood, etc. I'll come to that. All this they ceased. Now to get back, there's something interesting here. The war of thoughts that fathers the universe. That means there is the struggle of ideas, idealism, and all that is there behind the so-called evolution of man. And then there's a clash of forces struggling to prevail. This is our normal life where we see umpteen dimensions or umpteen levels of forces which are struggling to prevail over each other. In the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust. Now here, it's extremely interesting to see how there is, Aurobindo describes how there is this energy, the force, behind the light energy behind that which lights a star, as much as in building of a grain of dust. This is something which immediately I recollected another line from Aurobindo. The hand that sends Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning to fashion a curve. I mean, I had read this in my student days, but I had never been able to forget this extraordinary sentence. I mean, not only the thought is brilliant, the hand that sent Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning, the skill, the craftsmanship, all its cunning to fashion a curl on a woman's forehead. So that is the omnipotence and the care. That is the immense energy that is there in all that is big in this world, massive, and all that is small, infinitesimally small. And lo and behold, this line that I was admiring all my life, I found them very beautifully explained in the Life Divine, a chapter called The Pure Existent. This is page 79 of Collected Works, and is the Life Divine volume, I don't know which one. What's the Life Divine volume? Collected Works? 2. Number 2, volume? I think it's 18. No, 18 is the old version, 18, 19. In the new edition, I don't know. Well, whatever. The chapter is called The Pure Existent. For this boundless movement is the force, the energy. For this boundless movement does not regard us as unimportant to it. Science reveals to us how minute is the care, how cunning the device, how intense the absorption it bestows upon the smallest of its works, even as on the largest. This mighty energy is an equal and impartial mother, Samam Brahma, in the great term of the Gita, and its intensity and force of movement is the same in the formation and upholding of a system of suns and the organization of the life of an anthill. It is the illusion of size, of quantity, that induces us to look on the one as great, the other as petty. If we look, on the contrary, not at mass of quantity but force of quality, we shall say that the ant is greater than the solar system it inhabits, and man is greater than all inanimate nature put together. But this again is the illusion of quality. When we go behind and examine only the intensity of the movement, of which quality and quantity are aspects, we realize that this Brahman dwells equally in all existences. Equally partaken of by all in its being, we are tempted to say, equally distributed to all in its energy. But this too is an illusion of quantity. Brahman dwells in all, indivisible, yet as if divided and distributed. If we look again with an observing perception, not dominated by intellectual concepts, but informed by intuition and culminating in knowledge by identity, we shall see that the consciousness of this infinite energy is other than our mental consciousness, that it is indivisible and gives not an equal part of itself, but its whole self at one and the same time to the solar system as to the anthill. To Brahman, there are no whole and parts, but each thing is all itself and benefits by the whole of Brahman. Quality and quantity differ. The self is equal. The form and manner and result of the force of action vary infinitely, but the eternal, primal, infinite energy is the same in all. The force of strength that goes to make the strong man is no whit greater than the force of weakness that goes to make the weak. The energy spent is as great in repression as in expression, in negation as in affirmation, in silence as in sound. This is one of the most beautiful explanations of the Vedantic philosophy. And I'm sure you have understood here, and is comparing very beautifully the system of suns and the organization of the life in an anthill. You see, in both the anthill and the solar system, the energy is the same. So we should not be thinking, that the solar system is magnificent, is immensely huge and vast, and therefore is greater than the anthill. But it says no. On the contrary, if you have to see the quality of expression, the anthill is greater than the solar system, because the ant has a consciousness at manifestation, whereas the solar system is static. It is moving, but it doesn't evolve, whereas the ant is a dynamic consciousness. Ant hill. Ant hill. You get that word? Ants. You know the word ant? Yeah. Where they make an ant hill, yeah. So he's comparing the ant hill to the solar system. So he says, if you want to see the quantity, yes, the solar system is big. But if you see the quality, the ant is greater than the mountains or the solar system, because it has got a very expressive consciousness. It has a dynamic consciousness. And then he says, okay, let us not compare the quantity and the quality even, because behind this quality and the quantity, there is one single consciousness of the Brahman. And not only one single consciousness, what is very beautiful here, he says, we shall see that the consciousness of this infinite energy is other than our mental consciousness, that it is indivisible and gives not an equal part of itself, but its whole self at one and the same time to the solar system as to the anthill. That's the extraordinary. You know that Sanskrit verse, Purnasya Purnasya. So we have this famous verse in the Vedas which says that if you take out the infinite from the Brahman, it is still the infinite. If you add infinite to the Brahman, it is still the infinite. So this concept has been there right from the beginning of the Vedas, that there is you cannot make parts or parcels of Brahman consciousness. In the anthill or the solar system, the consciousness is not only the same, but it is the fullness. That's beautiful here. It is indivisible and gives not an equal part. It's not that, anthill takes 5% and the mountains take 55%. It's not that. It says, but its whole self at one and the same time to the solar system and the anthill. To Brahman there are no whole and parts, but each thing is all itself and benefits by the whole of Brahman. This is what I wanted to bring to your notice when we read these lines. The hand that spends Jupiter spinning through heaven spends all its cunning. So it's the same energy, it's the same consciousness, it's the same movement. But here in poetry, in the poetic lines, it's a little different shade, but I wanted to bring in this question what Sri Aurobindo is telling. In the tremendous shock that lights a star, as in the building of a grain of dust. So he's comparing that what makes a star or what makes a grain of dust. It's the same quantity of consciousness of the Supreme. And this experience Ashwapati has at this level. And then he goes on to say, the grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, plugged by the seeking of the world's desire, the long regurgitations in time's flood. Because regurgitations, there's something gushing back, in this gushing back of the evolution. So he's saying all these things, the gushing backs of time's evolution, the grooves that turn their dumb ellipse in space, I imagine that is the planets growing in their grooves. All these are there. The torment edging the dire course of lust that wakes kinetic in earth's dullard slime. Each one is a different experience. So Ashwapati is going through each one of them and carves a personality out of mud, the sorrow by which nature's hunger is fed. You see, this is, you can see, and carves a personality out of mind, that is the coming of man in evolution. And these are the different stages of evolution. The ostrich which creates with fire of pain, the fate that punishes virtue with defeat, the tragedy that destroys long happiness, the weeping of love, the quarrel of the gods, seized in a truth which lives in its own life. So I was telling you, all these single line experiences that we have been given, they all cease for Ashwapati at his level of consciousness. So Sri Aurobindo has given us a list of common experiences that humanity goes through, but all these common human experiences do not exist for Ashwapati on that level of consciousness. And once it ceases, what happens? His soul stood free, a witness and a king. Now, I ask myself, why has Sri Aurobindo used the word for soul king? He says his soul stood free, a witness and a king. Witness we understand, it is the witness Purusha. But why has Sri Aurobindo called this soul the king? Well, this has a bit of a connotation linked with the Gita, Bhagavad Gita. Where there are two words, Swarat and Samrat. In Indian philosophy or psychology, I would say, this is one of the important principles, that once you have controlled, master yourself, Swarat means master, Swa is me, Rat is mastering myself. That means once you master yourself, what in English we can say, it's a self-rule. So once you have begun and mastering yourself, then there is Samrat. So Samrat is the ruler of one's world environment. So this is our Indian philosophy, that first you master yourself. That means you have to control yourself. On the contrary, we normally try to control the circumstances without controlling ourselves. So the Indian psychology is Swarat followed by Samrat. It's only when you conquer yourself that you can conquer the outside. So this conquering outside is what is called the Swarat, the emperor. And then the Samrat is the emperor. So from this concept of emperor, Sri Aurobindo has brought in the word the king. So now putting this together, what do you understand? That his soul stood free, a witness and a king. That means it is not only a master of itself, but now it is master of all that surrounds. There's a line in English poetry, I forget now, I am the master of all that I see. I don't know from where I picked it up. Or all that I reign or something. However, so this is the concept. You first master yourself, then you can master your environment, world environment. So it's from there we see the link here. And absorb no more in the moment-ridden flux, where mind incessantly drifts as on a raft, hurried from phenomenon to phenomenon, he abode at rest in indivisible time. So that's what we have read here in the liberation of the mind, that he really goes beyond. I have escaped and the small self is dead. I am immortal, alone, ineffable. I have gone out from this universe I made and have grown nameless and immeasurable. It's the same experience here, that he becomes, the abode is in the indivisible time. He has escaped the phenomenon, he has escaped the outer things, the moment-ridden flux, and and is now part of the indivisible time. Now there we have one picture or image that closes. We have another one coming up here. As if a story long written but acted now, in his present he held his future and his past, felt in the seconds the uncounted years, and saw the hours like dots upon a page. Now this is again a new experience. Now what is important here, at least when I read that these lines, is that he sees the hours like dots upon a page. What are these hours? And at the same time he has given us a hint here, in his present he held his future and his past. So here is an experience where, you see, we have got the word indivisible time just in the previous line. What does it mean? That now Ashrapati is living in a time frame which is indivisible. That means there is no past, present and future, which in Sanskrit we call as a Trikala Drishti. That means having the vision of the three times simultaneously. So if Ashrapati is living on that level, or reach that consciousness level, then what happens? In his present he held his future and his past. Obviously, all the three time frames are linked together in his presence. And then he sees the hours like dots upon a page. Now, each of these hours is represented by something that has happened in the past. Now, at his present consciousness, what he's seeing is all these events of the past are connected. And there is a kind of a line that goes through all these events, because time is indivisible. It is we, with our limited consciousness, we need to divide past, present and future. But for the infinite consciousness, there is no division of time. So Ashrapati is going through that. And this is what I remembered about the Buddha. You see, when we say the Buddha had this enlightenment, the word Buddha itself is to enlighten. I went into search and say, what exactly happened to him? You see, when we say Sri Aurobindo had this nirvanic experience, Sri Aurobindo writes what kind of an experience it was. When Sri Aurobindo writes that when he had this experience at Shankaracharya Hill, he gives a beautiful description of it through a poem. So we know the contents of this realization. So I asked myself, what is the content of this enlightenment? What exactly did the Buddha feel or experience? Well, if you go into Buddhist literature, we see a description where the Buddha tells us that at this moment of enlightenment, one of the experiences was he saw his entire past. And all of them, as is described here, dots or experiences, his incarnations, that were all linked. So he says it's like a film he saw in a big rush one after the other, his experiences of all his previous janmas, or previous births. So that was a very peculiar thing. That, of course, that itself is not enlightenment, but one of the experiences was all his previous births were seen as if it was in a film. So we see that this is a common experience of spirituality, that when you are in that higher consciousness, your past gets revealed. Even Mother and Aurobindo, they tell us that when you reach the psychic consciousness, when you realize the psychic being, at that time, if you want, you can know all your past births. Because it's psychic that takes the birth after birth. So it's only the psychic consciousness which can give you contact with its own previous births. So that's what is happening to Ashwapati, I guess, here. An aspect of the unknown reality altered the meaning of the cosmic scene. Obviously, if you really experience the reality, the Supreme, all the meaning of this world changes. And because one of the things, what happened? This huge material universe became a small result of a stupendous force. Because of his experience of reality, all that massive universe also becomes something small. Overtaking the moment, the eternal ray illumined that which never yet was made. Thought lay down in a mighty voicelessness. The toiling thinker widened and grew still. Wisdom transcendent touched his quivering heart. You see, there's a single line. Thought lay down in a mighty voicelessness. I get the same contrast. Because what happens? Normally thought is full of sound and fury. Voice, we speak, we hear, we yell, we are angry. So the thought expresses is sound. But here, it was voiceless, it was silent. So, there we see, and the toiling thinker widened and grew still. His soul could sail beyond thought's luminous bar. Mind screened no more the shoreless infinite. Obviously, at that level, when you go beyond the mind cannot obstruct or screen the other realities of spirituality. You see, as long as we are in the mental consciousness, the vital and the physical, there's a huge lid over our head, and we cannot see what is beyond. But if we penetrate that lid of the mind, then this whole realms of the upper level become free. They become visible. So here we see, mind screened no more the shoreless infinite. Across a void retreating sky, he glimpsed through a last glimmer and drift of vanishing stars, the superconscient realms of motionless peace. See, again, we have this motionless peace, what we had previously, the silence and the omnipotent peace. So once all these lids are gone, he sees beyond. What does he see? The superconscious realms. And what are the superconscious realms? Well, you would have known by now. There is this illumined mind, the higher mind, and the illumined mind, and the intuitive, etc. These are called the superconscious realms. So the whole struggle actually for us, the common human beings, is to break the lid of the mind, which normally you do in moments of meditation. That is why meditation is important. Because meditation can be done in two ways. One, to go within towards the psychic. The other is to go beyond the lid of the mind. And for that penetration to go beyond the lid, you need a tremendous focusing of your consciousness. And meditation is one of those means where your meditation can become like a cone of consciousness. And with this cone of consciousness, there's a tremendous power, and you can break through that lid. That is one of the functions of meditations, to take you beyond the realm of the mind. And so you would say, the superconscious realms of motionless peace, where judgment ceases and the world is mute, and the unconceived lies pathless and alone. Of course, we see here, where judgment ceases and the world is mute, of course, beyond the mind there is no judgment. And the unconceived, please note that unconceived is U capital, that means the reality, the supreme. There came not form or any mounting voice. There were only silence and the absolute. So this is quite a reflection of Sri Aurobindo's own experience at the Shankara Hill in Kashmir, where he had this experience of Brahman as the impersonal, not the personal divine, but as the impersonal divine. So that impersonal divine, Sri Aurobindo explains here as silence and absolute. Well, and when one is there in that consciousness, obviously there is no form or any mounting voice. I mean, these are, once we understand what is happening, it is easier to interpret. Because once you go beyond the mind, there is no voice, there is no judgment, there is no form. It is all formlessness. So, out of that stillness, mind. Now, let me stop here and explain something more. You see, there's a poem here. In this volume 5 of Sri Aurobindo's SABCL 5, on page 567, there's a poem called The Ascent, or just The Ascent, not The Ascent, but only Ascent. And before that, on page 563, there's a poem called Descent. So there are two poems, Ascent and Descent, which are very crucial to Sri Aurobindo's own philosophy. Now the first one that we see in this experience of Sri Aurobindo, or Ashwapati, whatever you want to call, there only was silence and absolute. Now the same image, the same experience we catch in this poem, Ascent. I'll read it out for you. Page 567. Into the silence, arise, O Spirit immortal. Away from the turning wheel, breaking the magical circle. Ascend, single and deathless. Care no more for the worshippers and the shoutings in the darkness. Pass from the sphere of the grey and the little, leaving the cry and the struggle, into the silence forever. Vast and immobile, formless and marvelous, higher than heaven, wider than the universe, in a pure glory of being, in a bright stillness of self-seeing, communing with a boundlessness, voiceless and intimate. Make thy knowledge too high for thought, thy joy too deep for emotion. At rest in the unchanging light, mute with the wordless self-vision. Spirit, pass out of thyself. Soul, escape from the clutch of nature. All thou hast seen, cast from thee, O witness. Turn to the alone and the absolute. Turn to the eternal. Be only eternity, peace and silence. O world transcending nameless oneness, Spirit immortal. So you can see the austere ascent, leaving behind this world, this darkness of this world, higher than heaven, wider than the universe, and he reaches this beautiful experience of to the alone and the absolute and the eternal. But this is the essence of this experience that we see in Sri Aurobindo's experience of the impersonal. And then, just to bring to your notice again, Sri Aurobindo's use of this concept of the alone and the eternal. There is in Book 1, Canto 4, am I right there? Yeah. Book 1, Canto 4, there is about 3 plus about 20 lines. The para starts with the absolute. It's called the absolute, the perfect, the alone. And if ever you want a summary of Sri Aurobindo's philosophy, these 20 lines give you the fullest summary of his philosophy and his yoga. And this line starts with the absolute, the perfect, the alone. This is quite Canto 4. No, my edition is different, so I cannot guide you. It's quite toward the end, perhaps. Yeah. Toward the end, last 3 pages before. There's a new para, so you'll not miss it. Got it? Book 1, Canto 4. Towards the last 3 pages, before last 3 pages. The line is the absolute, the perfect, the alone. Got it, Mirajati? My edition is page 77, 54 edition is 77. But your editions are different, so. Yeah, towards the end. 3 pages before. 67? Got it, Anandi? Yeah. Let me read out, again, this is one of my very favorite passages. It has his entire philosophy and yoga. And the same concept, the experience that Ashwapati has about silence and absolute. You see how Sri Aurobindo uses it as the base of his philosophy. The absolute, the perfect, the alone, has called out of the silence his mute force. Where she lay in the featureless and formless hush, guarding from time by her immobile sleep the ineffable puissance of his solitude. Well, obviously she is that Aditi. She is the mother. She is that Chit Shakti. So, he has called out, the alone has called out of silence his mute force, where she lay in the featureless and formless hush. And again the same line, incredibly how in Savitri he repeats this line sometimes, The absolute, the perfect, the alone, has entered with his silence into space. He has fashioned these countless persons of one's self. He lives in all, who lived in his vast alone. Space is himself, and time is only he. The absolute, the perfect, the immune. One who is in us as our secret self, our mask of imperfection has assumed. He has made this tenement of flesh his own, his image in the human measure cast, that to his divine measure we might rise. Then in a figure of divinity, the Maker shall recast us and impose a plan of Godhead on the mortal's mold, lifting our finite minds to his infinite. Touching the moment with eternity, the transfiguration is earth's due to heaven, This is where the yoga begins. This transfiguration is earth's due to heaven. A mutual death binds man to the Supreme. His nature we must put on, as he put ours. We are sons of God and must be even as he. His human portion, we must grow divine. Our life is a paradox with God for key. I mean, one of the most inspiring passages, packed with philosophy, packed with vision of future. And the whole rhythm is really, is not rushing, it's quiet, because it's describing the whole of creation itself. And then you have seen the aspect of the Divine Mother there. So these are again the same experiences of the Absolute, the Perfect and the Alone. So I thought, I would like to add these lines when I'm explaining or trying to understand what Ashwapati is going through here. There were only silence and absolute. Now I stopped here because just after this there is a reversal of the movement. He has had an ascent into this absolute and the silence, and then he says where there is no form. But then immediately says, out of that stillness mind newborn arose. There's a reversal of movement. There's a mind, he has crossed the mind, but coming back to a mind which is newborn, which is a transformed mind, and woke to truths once inexpressible. And forms appeared, dumbly significant, a seeing thought, a self-revealing voice. He knew the source from which his spirit came. Movement was married to the immobile vast. He plunged his roots into the infinite. He based his life upon eternity. I mean, you see, this is what I admire Sri Aurobindo. He never leaves you in the ascent. He doesn't leave you in that absolute alone and silent. He brings you back because he says, when we come back, there is this newborn mind which understands things. Their forms have reappeared. A seeing thought, now it's no more that empty thought which has contradictions, it's the revealing voice. And then movement was married to the immobile vast. Again that brilliant Aurobindonian line. That immobile vast is not the static one. He is the dynamic one. There is the movement that is married to it. And that's the finale. He plunged his roots into the infinite. And he based his life upon eternity. And this is no one but you see that photograph there. Yeah, I wonder how he lived his life based on eternity. Imagine we are getting his words, one who lived like that, and then I'll end with a reading of the same poem. Not the whole of it, maybe a few paragraphs, stanzas from a poem called Descent on page 563 of volume 5. I mean, these single lines are enough to take us back into his experiences where he says, forms appeared, seeing thought, there's a newborn mind that arose. Now that gave me a hint of this descent. All my cells thrill, swept by a surge of splendor. Soul and body stir with a mighty rapture. Light and still more light, like an ocean billows over me, round me. Rigid, stone-like, fixed like a hill or statue, vast my body feels and upbears the world's weight. Dire the last descent of the Godhead enters limbs that are mortal. Voiceless, thronged, infinity crowds upon me, presses down a glory of power eternal. Mind and heart grow one with the cosmic wideness. Still are earth's murmurs. This next stanza Amal Kiran has chosen as one of the most inspiring lines from Aurobindo. I mean, I don't have his commentary, but I remember. Swiftly, swiftly crossing the golden spaces, knowledge leaps, a torrent of rapid lightnings. Thoughts that left the ineffable's flaming mansions blaze in my spirit. Slow the heartbeat's rhythm like a giant hammer's mission voices drive to me from God's doorway, words that live not save upon nature's summits, ecstasy's chariots. All the world is changed into a single oneness, souls undying, infinite forces meeting, join in God dance, weaving a seamless nature, rhythm of the deathless. Mind and heart and body, one harp of being, cry that anthem, finding the notes eternal, light and might and bliss and immortal wisdom clasping forever. And that is a very powerful, in fact, if you ask Amal Kiran, one of the most inspired poems, of course Amal Kiran goes with the rhythm of the words, the sound of this each word. So he has described at a great length these words, these lines. Well, that is what brings us to the descent, and there is a small explanation in this line. He plunged his roots into the infinite. Now here there is, in my understanding, a little, maybe it's my explanation, but what I understand is, in our Indian philosophy, there's a concept of Ashwatha tree. In the Vedas, they have given us an image of a tree which is upside down. It's called the Ashwatha tree, which has its roots in the divine, and the branches and the leaves and all that is the manifestation. So they say this manifestation is linked and rooted in the infinite, but there is this finite manifestations. So there's a beautiful image of the Ashwatha tree which tells you about the creation aspect. And here I see Aurobindo using that image of the roots being plunged into the infinite, and then the life of eternity is the manifestation. And and then on page 91, the same book 1, canto 5, I would like to end with these lines, because this is exactly what happens. I mean, Savitri, you can keep on reading and you don't know where to stop or where to start. But where I got the link, what happens to somebody who bases his life upon eternity? And we have a beautiful description, not directly answering this question, but in my little search I found some very connected lines in book 1, canto 5. And the lines you can see, there's a new para, maybe it's easier to give you that. In a divine retreat from mortal thought. You find that line, which is about 5-6 pages after the beginning of book 1, canto 5. In 1954 edition, it is page 91. 80. Okay, in your present version, it's 80. Now, I'm always, enchanted by the way Sri Aurobindo has brought in his own personal experiences, both in Savitri and in the sonnets. And there are so many continuations of his experiences. I hope you got the para? Yeah. Now you see, it's the same thing. A divine retreat from mortal thought. That's what we are discussing. He has gone beyond the level of the mind. And what happens? We have seen some images here, some experiences, and now another set of them. In a divine retreat from mortal thought, in a prodigious gesture of soul sight, his being towered into pathless heights, naked of its vesture of humanity. Absolutely very similar images. As thus it rose to meet him bare and pure, a strong descent leaped down. A might, a flame, a beauty half visible with deathless eyes, a violent ecstasy, a sweetness dire, enveloped him with his stupendous limbs, and penetrated nerve and heart and brain, that thrilled and fainted with the epiphany. His nature shuddered in the unknown's grasp, in a moment shorter than death, longer than time, by a power more ruthless than love, happier than heaven, taken sovereignly into eternal arms, hailed and coerced by a stark absolute bliss, in a whirlwind circuit of delight and force, hurried into unimaginable depths, upborne into immeasurable heights. It was torn out from its mortality and underwent a new and boundless change. An omniscient knowing without sight or thought, an indecipherable omnipotence, a mystic form that could contain the worlds, yet make one human breast its passionate shrine, drew him out of his seeking loneliness into the magnitudes of God's embrace. As when a timeless eye annuls the hours, abolishing the agent and the act, so now his spirit shone out, wide, blank, pure. His vacant mind became an empty slate on which the universal and soul could write. All that represses our fallen consciousness was taken from him like a forgotten load, a fire that seemed the body of a god, consumed the limiting figures of the past, and made large room for a new self to live. Well, there are more lines you can continue, but this is what I found similarity between this Canto 5 and the Canto 3 that we see, that as soon as you go beyond the realm of the mind, there are innumerable experiences awaiting you that really have the touch of the absolute, the touch of the freedom, and then as it says, there is no humanity, the world, the deadly silence of ignorance, all these are left behind. So there are beautiful passages describing this, but I just picked out one. I mean, this whole of Canto 5, right from the beginning, you can see his experiences. Maybe in our study we'll take up Canto 5 also, but I'm not too sure. But I just wanted to bring you to these beautiful lines. So, this is Sri Aurobindo himself, one who based his life upon eternity. And as typically is Sri Aurobindo, he will never leave or live in the infinite. There's another poem called Life Heavens, if you come across somewhere, I don't know here. You should read that poem called The Life Heavens. That's again typical Aurobindo. I mean, in one of his experiences, he goes beyond into the life, into heavens. And there he describes wonderful place, peaceful, joyous, lovely, all beautiful. And there was a moment of self-forgetfulness, almost just a passing moment, when he begins to enjoy that heaven, at that moment he hears the earth crying to him, "Hey, don't forget us. You have actually come for us, not to live your life in that life heavens." So there's a beautiful, next time if I remember I'll bring it. If you do remember, read it at home. So this is Aurobindo, who has never left earth behind. He has enjoyed the great heavens, but there was always the earth, the cry of the earth, which he remembers and comes back. So this infinity and eternity and all that you have seen in the descent also, that is typically Aurobindo. That's why we love it, because he is with us, for us, amongst us. Right? We'll stop here and we'll take up the next one.